All right, everybody. So, again, for YouTube, if you're on the stream, you already know who I am. I'm Mason. For those that are on YouTube, this is One Hand Politics. I'm somebody who has really just entered the online political sphere. I'm somebody who's been a fundraiser for different LGBTQ and progressive orgs for most of my life. And now I'm finally starting to share that with random strangers on the internet. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on. I just wanted to first start by saying, big fan of your work. This is been a wild thing, us being able to connect from a viral social media post. But thank you so much again.
Yeah,
Ryan is a
nice
multiple.
work with Ben.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. Ryan's written multiple books, including "This Is Your Country on Drugs: The Secret History of Getting High in America." We've got the people and the squad, AOC in the Hope of Political Revolution. Also, the co-host of Counterpoints. So if you want to check that out, give it a check. Thanks so much for coming on again, Ryan. How you been doing?
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. How you doing?
Doing well, doing well. For someone that's so well researched as a voice for progressive causes, I think it would be a waste to not educate viewers with an update on the Palestinian liberation struggle. I just saw an update this morning from Reuters, actually, that said that Israeli tanks are thrusting deeper into two North Gaza towns and a historic refugee camp, which is trapping around 100,000 civilians, according to the
hmm
Palestinian Emergency Service. I just wanted to see if you can add any context for the viewers on what we should be really looking at when it comes to viewing this conflict.
Yeah, that's the Jabalia refugee camp. And in fact, over at Dropsite, we just published a fascinating profile of a woman named Zakia Dawood, who has lived there for 80 years, lived through the original Nakba. She was, I believe, she was 6 years old when that happened. And her description of what's going on today compared to 1948 is quite striking, in the way that she's talking about this genocide as so much worse. Like people might find that hard to believe, given the imprint that moment in time has on people's generational memories and her specific memory because she was alive during it. But the way she describes it, it's so much dramatically worse. We've been in touch with medical staff in North Gaza over the last month, several months, and uh, watching their and listening to their increasingly frantic warnings has been kind of soul sucking. The IDF has since basically stormed all of the hospitals, shut them down. The images coming out of that are just absolutely brutal. Patients who rely on oxygen units that have been blown up, or medical supplies, or staff are dying, by the hour as we speak. So what's going on in North Gaza? The last year has been an immensely difficult time for people in Gaza, but the last several weeks in North Gaza have really ratcheted it up exponentially, uh, and you really haven't seen that reflected, I think, in the news coverage of it.
Yeah, I mean, Israeli military personnel have said that its forces are trying to operate in keeping with international law and have accused militants of hiding fighters and weaponry in civilian areas, which is something that almost, I mean, the International Court of Justice has even said that this is a conflict, the likes of which we have not really seen, specifically when it comes to disproportionate killings for one particular side of this conflict. How do you think that the U.S. is going to respond to these types of crimes? I mean, we've seen the callousness of the Biden Harris administration when it comes to not really acknowledging what's going on. Do you think that that's going to continue, or are we going to see a shift just because of how brutal these recent attacks have been?
I mean, you either have to think that the U.S. is the weakest, most pitiful superpower in the history of empires, or that the U.S. is okay with this behavior by Israel. Like it's really difficult to imagine any other scenario, and I really don't think that it's accurate to say that the U.S. is the weakest superpower in history. Like I think you're left with the conclusion that the policy is what's happening, and that they're okay with this. Even Israel continues to thumb its nose at the U.S., or at least publicly. Today, Israel passed a law through its Knesset banning UNRWA, the main UN relief agency that operates in Gaza, over the public and stated objections of the United States. At the State Department press briefing today, Matt Miller, the spokesperson, said that there could be implications of that, for U.S. law. So they're saying all these things publicly, and Israel continues to defy the U.S. publicly. And at some point, you have to just, I think, accept that the U.S. is okay with that, because they have a zillion different tools at their disposal that could push policy in a different direction if they chose to use them.
Now, I might just be uneducated on this in particular, but Trump has said that he's had talks with Netanyahu about what that response will look like if Trump is to assume office in January. What has the Harris or Biden administration responded to these claims that Trump's in talks with Netanyahu, or are they kind of just pretending like this is something that is not happening?
I mean, I think that what they're saying is that Trump is a maniac, and you can't believe anything he says. What Trump has spoken out of both sides of his mouth on this issue. He has said, on the one hand, he's the candidate of peace. A, it never would have happened if I was president. B, I'll end it when I'm president. At the same time, a couple of weeks ago, he said that Biden's problem in managing the conflict was that he was too restrictive towards Netanyahu, that he should have given Netanyahu more of a leash to go ahead and attack Gaza, and I guess Lebanon and Iran as well. So you can't. So which Trump would you get as president? And maybe you get both. Maybe he acts one way one day and another way another day.
Yeah, I mean, Trump has been endorsed by Muslim American leaders, including the Yemeni American Organization, and I don't think anyone with a rationality can say that this is because Trump has seemed to be easier on these conflicts. I think it's more of just a dissatisfaction with the Biden-Harris's role and what this conflict looks like. And I'm curious to hear what you think is really causing a lot of these groups who are really endorsing something that's against their own interest. What's the cause of them kind of jumping in the Trump camp?
I think so. You saw the PAC, the Pakistani American PAC, also come out for Trump. That was specifically because the Biden administration had orchestrated a legislative coup against Imran Khan, who is extremely popular among the Pakistani diaspora here in the United States. I think that what's going on with some Muslim voters is that they really took the mantra of a vote for Jill Stein is a vote for Donald Trump to heart. And in some ways, it's having the courage of your convictions. Like if you believe that you should not vote for Kamala Harris because of what she's doing in Gaza and in Lebanon, but you don't also then support her opponent, the only one who could stop her from getting into office, there is an interesting kind of contradiction there in your conscience. Now, most people are like, well, I just can't. He's just such a creep and a disaster and a racist pig that I just can't go there. But then you're looped back around to the beginning. Well, if that's all true about him, shouldn't you then vote for the person who can beat him? So I think what's going on is that a decent number of people who have decided that genocide is their red line and they're going to oppose Harris have decided that they have to go all the way. And I think some of them think that tactically, if Trump gets a decent amount of Muslim support or Arab American support, that he's so transactional and is such a kind of transparent person where if you say nice things about him, he likes you, period. That maybe they think that they can get a piece of that Trump action. And who knows? He's at once like the most predictable, but also the least predictable figure.
Yeah, he's so quick to really go against anybody who has slight criticism of him. And in
like
the same
Netanyahu
breath,
congratulated Biden for winning the 2020 election. Trump is still mad at Netanyahu, like to this day, for doing that.
Yeah, it's the instability of that leader. I get how it can be appealing to people who are just dissatisfied with establishment politics, but at the same time, this person's not an outsider, and that's what's so interesting to hear him at his rallies. Really project as somebody who's outside of the mainstream when this is a previous president. He was in power for 4 years. This is somebody who is now a career politician by definition. I don't know how he can keep trying to hold on to that same label of shaking things up when most of his appointments were neoconservatives who were
Right.
having the same foreign policy as many Republican administrations in the past.
Yeah. No, that's right. And when it came to Central and South America, Trump was maybe even more interventionist than, say, Obama. When he ramped up the drone war. So there's a lot of militarism and saber rattling that comes from Trump too. So
Yeah. That being said,
no, yeah.
yeah, I saw that Kamala Harris in a recent poll is up about 4% with a 2% margin of error, which is just like against a candidate like Trump. It should be something that's pretty in your face about how dissatisfied the American public is with you. Um, and I don't know what her strategy is with calling people like Liz Cheney a patriot. We have about 8 days to go, and she's really struggling in Arizona and Michigan, two states that would give her a lot of comfortability when it comes to winning this election. And I think when you look at the electorate and what their biggest concerns are, a lot of progressive voices who build momentum for these campaigns are just completely enraged that she will not recognize the Palestinian plight, or she will continue to just say, we will support Israel's right to defense at all costs. What do you think the calculus is for her to continue repeating the same mantra?
I mean, I think she's in. Like, this is her strategy for now. She's basically all in on it. It is a very negative strategy in the sense that it is trying to organize people around what they don't like. And so her belief is there are enough people that don't like Trump and are then happy to have the biggest possible coalition to go up against Trump. That's certainly their gamble. I think if she loses, in hindsight, we'll all say, good Lord, that was absurdly idiotic thing to do. On the other hand, it's a tie. Like, who knows? Like, it may be that just women in general, like, I think that could be the story that people are still missing. Like, pollsters in the media missed how much power women were going to flex in the 2018 midterms. Then they missed it again in the 2020 presidential race, and they even missed it again in 2022 after Roe v. Wade was overturned. And there's no evidence that they have fixed their inability to see it. So I would suspect that you might see the polls be off a little bit, at least when it comes to that, and that would be Kamala winning, but through really no credit of her own.
Do you think that if Kamala does win, they'll start to see the rightward shift on a lot of these issues like immigration, like foreign policy, as something that's a viable strategy? And we'll see candidates in 2026 and 2028 kind of try to ride that same momentum of a center left, almost center right domestic and foreign policy agenda?
I think immigration, yes. I think they'll go right on that and stay right. I don't think necessarily that it's baked in that they would go right on foreign policy. Like, I think they believe that if they win, it would be despite the problems that they have when it comes to foreign policy, and that what Cheney is bringing to the ticket is not neoconservatism. Like, the fact that she brings that to the ticket, I think they see as a downside of the coalition they've built, but it's one that they kind of have to swallow, because they want the whole brand of like having like high profile Republicans with them. On the other hand, they're not as outwardly hostile to that hawkish foreign policy as they are outwardly hostile to, say, like a lot of elements of the Bernie wing.
Yeah. On the flip side, we're seeing Donald Trump have a rally in Madison Square Garden that I think had a lot of interesting, you could call them highlights or call them lowlights. Obviously, everybody's making buzz about the comedian, I think it's Tony Hillcliffe, who talked about Puerto Rico being a trash island attached to the United States. But I think what people haven't given a lot of attention to is people like David Rem referring to Harris as the Antichrist, or Grant Cardone saying that Harris has pimps that are going to handle the country. 15 years ago, I feel like this is political suicide for people to be saying comments like this. And I think it's just become a staple or norm of Trump's appeal to voters. Do you think that this will sway moderates in any way? Or do you think that people have kind of just accepted that this is a norm of Trump in his political campaign?
Uh, I think it probably reminds some people of what they don't like about him. Like, I think to say that anything is fully baked in, I think probably overstates it. Obviously, most everybody knows what they think of Trump, one way or another. There are very few people who are waiting to make up their minds about him. But I think reminding people about his worst impulses is harmful to him down the stretch. He's better off when people kind of forget some of that stuff and think of him more warmly from a distance, or think of, say, like the good economy in 2019 from a distance, without his antics, or his bigotry, or his just crudeness on full on display. And so the more he can kind of just back off of that a little bit and let people kind of think, view his term through the prism of nostalgia, the better for him. So I think it does actually matter to some extent.
Yeah, I think that women in particular are going to be one of the biggest driving forces of this election. And I think the rights, they're shooting themselves in the foot by continuing to just use the rhetoric of, Kamala Harris slept her way to the top, or this is somebody who's incompetent, not smart, can't really effectively run a campaign.
Elon Musk's super PAC dropped a whole ad today calling her, quote, the C word. Did you see this?
Yeah, I did. They were referencing her as a
Completely
communist,
insane.
but yeah, implying,
But through the whole thing, they're doing some like juvenile joke. It's like wow, like you guys are total creatures.
yeah, the Tony Stark, the Iron Man of the world with the most brilliant political strategy. Why do you think that specifically Elon using bribery to get people to like sign petitions for his super PAC? I've seen that he's been like offering $1 million to random people who sign like a freedom of speech petition or whatever it is that they're having. Do you think I'm curious, does that like violate any campaign regulations, or do these super PACs kind of act without any sort of oversight or sort of like government control?
Well, the Pennsylvania District Attorney Larry Krasner is coming after him. It is it is illegal to pay people to register to vote, or to like it's maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe this is very American stuff. You can gamble on everything now, so maybe you should be able to gamble on this. That's debatable. What's not debatable is the law on the books. Like it is actually flat out illegal. Like it's against the law.
So is the strategy like any sort of legal challenges won't happen until after the election anyway? So
I think their thinking is like the laws don't apply to me. Like I'm too powerful. Nobody's actually going to do that. So
yeah, Trump having a rally in New York was really interesting to me. New York has been a state that hasn't voted Republican in nearly 40 years, almost half a century. But that hasn't stopped Trump from continuing to insist that he will win the state of New York. In the same breath, he calls New York a crime-ridden cesspool, and he said similar remarks about places like Detroit and a lot of key urban cities that he needs in order to win those electoral votes. Do you think that that's going to really stop people from continuing to support him? Or do you think, again, these are just Trump antics where people don't take it seriously?
Yeah, I don't think people take it too seriously.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I want to hear about your Shapiro interview.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Or not interview, debate. What are those debates? I see them kicking around sometimes. Does he like just go to like a community center and he's like takes all comers, or like how'd you wind up there? How's that work?
Yeah, so Jubilee is like a media channel where they release like a lot of different forms of content. Some of them are more game show styles where it's like odd one out. There's like four, 5 or 6 people from a similar background. One person's lying, and it's kind of like a mafia style game where you're trying to figure out who the mole is.
Huh.
But this one is more along the lines of middle ground, which is more of like a civil debate of different ideas. Jubilee's come under a lot of fire right now for just giving platforms to kind of wild ideas. So they'll have like NASA scientists versus flat earthers, and they're kind of like bolstering it up to like very similar equal playing grounds when these are not two points of view that
Right.
should really be taken as seriously as they are. But yeah, with this one surrounded, it's a brand new format. I did the first one with Charlie Kirk. So he kind of had this like arena battle royale style where there's about 25 people surrounding this one challenger. They'll come up with a couple of claims, and then anyone has the opportunity to really come in and debate the legitimacy of what those claims are supposed to represent. So Charlie had one that went really viral. I think it's their fourth most viral video right now. It's at like 21 million views.
Why'd it
So
go
they
viral? Who won that one?
there were a lot of different moments. Charlie's was specifically college students. So I'm pursuing my doctorate in political theory, and I guess I counted as a college student. I'm friends with one of the directors who invited me to go on, but yeah, there was about 25 students, and they all went against Charlie, which is his forte. I mean, he goes
Hmm.
to college campuses, and that's really who he
Yeah.
sees as worthy opponents. But yeah, Parker and Dean are two TikTok debaters that really stood out. I made a couple of good conversational points with Charlie that went viral, and then they invited me back on to talk with Ben. I think Ben was the person who they thought, how can we top Charlie Kirk? Like he's kind of seen as like the final boss, I guess, of conservative debaters. So it was really fun. I'm really important. IRI is another Twitch streamer who also had a really great moment specifically on immigration. And then Muhammad, a friend of mine who's starting to become a little bit more known across the internet, really drilled him in on Gaza, which I was really proud of. I think that Ben is
Good.
probably one of the most staunch Zionist defenders in mainstream
Hmm.
politics, and so it was good to see someone who knew their stuff really put him to the fire. But yeah, my conversation with Ben was really. I was surprised that it got as viral as it did. I kind of just posted that tweet for friends of mine and other mutuals, and people just really liked what I had to say, specifically on immigration. I'm curious. Obviously, I reference you in your conversation with Matt Walsh. Were you sent that clip by somebody, or did you just get the jump scare of hearing yourself mentioned in a Twitter clip?
Yeah. So, I forget somebody sent it to me. I think it was somebody at Counterpoints sent it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. It was like a producer at Counterpoints saw it. I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
check
What
this out. Yeah.
what were your thoughts? Do you have any tips on what I could have done better to really drill
No,
down
and
into?
I mean, I'm also not like debating isn't really my forte. I go into those as interviews, just kind of asking them questions, and then if there are holes in their responses, just kind of going at those gaps, but rather than trying to kind of corner them somewhere. But yeah, I mean, I think it's always good when people bring up root causes of immigration because it really instantly shows how uninterested the person is in the actual issue. Like they really just do not care about it at all. If any of that is news to them, or if they just kind of throw their hands up and they're like, "Oh, sure," but that's separate. It's like, no, that's not separate. It also reflects a real chauvinism, and an American chauvinism to this belief that like everyone around the world just desperately wants to live in the United States, and it just doesn't reflect reality. Like we are very like you talk to regular people, they don't necessarily like our foreign policy, but they do like people all over the world like our culture, like what America stands for. But that doesn't mean that they want to move here. Like what most people would prefer is to live somewhere near where they have friends and family and connections, where they're rooted, where they're grounded, and it for them to travel thousands of miles through extraordinarily dangerous situations. It's not because they've heard there's like a gas card and like a free hotel they can get in New York. Like it's because they've been driven out. I think it really shows that people who just don't understand that just don't care about the issue at all, and so they're just out there, for making debating points. So, I thought you did a great job. What'd you think?
Yeah, it was great. I
How'd you
mean,
feel about it?
I was really confident going into it. I think that especially in those settings, we kind of have the advantage as, the 25, the army that's surrounding the one person in the middle of the circle. But yeah, I was pretty confident that Ben is used to talking to people who get really shaky and don't feel that same sort of conviction when it comes to those conversations. And so I was happy to really press him on that. I'm curious if you think if these people genuinely are just disregarding the root cause of these issues, or if it's something that they believe their audience doesn't care about, so they don't have to really mention.
I think it's that. I think it's both. I think it's definitely both. Um, and I also think that even though their audience is probably pretty non-interventionist, their the right wing power structure remains pretty interventionist. So from that perspective, they'd rather just kind of not talk about it. And I think if they figure if they don't bring it up, their audience isn't going to ask about it. And since they don't care one way or the other about it, that's an easy way to let it slide.
And that's just such a common centerpiece of most conservative issues. I think even when it relates to crime and what our response should be to that, it's always, increase funding towards police organizations, things that are really responses to crime instead of what really addresses what causes that crime in the first place. Conservatives don't really want to talk about how we alleviate poverty, how we stop people from desperate situations from committing these types of crimes. I find it interesting that that's so consistent among conservatives, and they're not really pressed on it when I see them on online conversations. So I really made sure that I wanted to emphasize that with my talk with Ben, 100%.
Cool, cool. Well, I should get going because I've got to get a story published.
Okay. Well, I really
For
appreciate
my
you coming on. I had one last
happy to come
question.
back on it. Yeah, if you got anything else, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So obviously, your conversation with Matt Walsh was something that really stuck with me, and that's what I referenced in my clip with Ben. Matt Walsh is somebody on his own show who calls trans parents pedophiles, civil rights activists anti-white racists, praises colonialism as cleansing of savagery. But he seems so tame with you. I wanted to hear
Right.
like what was your experience like sitting across from somebody like Matt Walsh?
Yeah, and also like we do so many interviews. I didn't really have any time to, or I guess I should say, I didn't really make any time kind of to
Yeah.
even remotely prepare for that. And yeah, like I had heard a lot about how contentious and rambunctious and like you said, bigoted he is. Uh, but he did seem to keep a lot of that in check, at least during that interview.
Yeah, I think that shows just kind of how cowardly a lot of these right wingers are when it comes to, how they conduct themselves in places where they don't have the audience that's going to just continue to root them on and whatever
Hmm.
bombastic thing that they say. If you
Yeah,
had to make a prediction right now, I know that we're still 8 days away. Who do you think's taking this election?
I don't. Let's see if at this point, maybe it's Kamala by like a hair, uh, but I could easily see the other guy winning. It's wild. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, my final prediction, I have it at 277 to 261. So I'm right there with you. I think it's pretty close. I do think she's going to lose Michigan just because of how
Hmm.
much pushback she's gotten specifically on the issue of Gaza. But I think she's going to win North Carolina, which a lot of people are calling me crazy for. So I guess we'll see how accurate those predictions are.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much again, Ryan. I really appreciate you coming on. I know that you're somebody who's super busy, especially this close to the election. So it means a lot that you were able to come on here and kind of share your thoughts on some of these things.
yeah.
If you
Happy to
want to
come
check
back
out,
too. Yeah,
is there anything that you wanted to plug for any viewers
yeah.
of the stream to check
Tell
out?
people we've got a free email list over at dropsitenews.com. So go sign up for our free email list. And
Great.
do the subscribe for you know actual ducats if you can, but at minimum join the free list.
Absolutely. Please support independent journalism. It's important now more than ever. We get pushback, especially from people in positions of power. So thank you so much, Ryan, for everything you do. I'm a big fan and really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Mason.